better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll those dice.
Howdy, Rob.
Howdy, Matt. Good evening. Good evening, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of Dungeon Master of None.
I'm Matt.
I'm Rob, and today we're going to talk about something not new, but a little different. Matt and I are both going to, we're going to talk about Daggerheart again, but we are going to talk about the experience of game mastering Daggerheart, specifically because we both now had time to do it a little bit, and we have a lot of thoughts about it, don't we, Matt?
Yeah. We've had enough time to get some stuff under our belt. I've got three one-shots, one really long, one really short, one medium length, and I was like, okay, my notes have accumulated. I'm ready to talk about this, and more than just the system overview. So hopefully you'll leave this episode with some tips, tricks, general advice for running this role-playing game, and I think enough of them apply to other games. If this game isn't your cup of tea, still stick around.
Yeah, I've now been running a regular game for a few months now, and I finally think I have some insights and observations to share. This is going to be focused on Daggerheart, of course, but I think there's a lot. I think it's been very interesting for me to run this because it's been educational as a game master in ways that other games have not been. And so, yeah, even if you're not running Daggerheart and not interested in it, I think that there's going to be a lot that you could learn from this. So, yeah, stay tuned.
You even got the chance to play in a Daggerheart game.
I did.
Too.
Yes.
Any advice now that you've gotten onto the player's side of the screen? What you had a nice seraph in a game?
I did. I played a seraph. There's a lot of sort of like obvious advice, but one thing that I think I would do differently, or I would think harder about, is, believe it or not, my selection of domain abilities. Those two cards that you pick at character creation. There's plenty of customization that can happen with your PC, but I think especially when you're just starting out, one of the most
level 1 and 2.
Yeah, level 1 and 2. The most important thing is going to be what domain cards you have on hand, because those are your real like make or break abilities. I had some good ones, but they were not the most useful in the scenario that I played, and I think I would have picked a couple of different ones if I had another go at it. You collect more of these as you level up, but if in the first tier and the first part of the second tier, level 1 and 2 especially, you don't have a lot to work with. And if you have the right ones, they're awesome, and you're going to be able to use them a whole bunch. And if you have the wrong ones, you're going to feel a little bit less useful. Some of this depends on what your class is, because also some classes have a little bit more of a impactful core ability. I think they're all very good, but and this depends on like what the rest of your party is like. But this was the thing that I was, I guess, the most surprised by, and I would do a little differently. I thought I was thinking hard enough about my domains, but I think I could have chosen a little bit more carefully.
Tip number 1, at early levels between sessions, encourage it or do not sweat it if a player asks you to change their domain cards.
Yeah.
Because they're really important at those early levels, especially if you're doing kind of a slow level up.
Yeah, there's some rules about this in the book, and we can talk about them, but especially in your first few sessions, I would say
I would just ignore those and just let people change.
Let your players just change their cards as they see fit. I don't think that there's any possible like downside to this. Just let them do it, because they all sound really cool. All the domain abilities seem neat, but some are more useful than others, or some may be more useful than others, depending on how the team shakes out. This is definitely something, just let your players switch them, especially in the first tier, first few sessions.
Yeah. My experience like running this game so far, since we're just talking about experiences, obviously it's a new game. Everyone I've played it with is new. I've had one repeat player in my one shot. I think it's the perfect game to teach as you go. Once you explain to players, hey, this is how the core role works. And then really forefront that idea of this is how you explain what your role is, right? Noting hope and fear.
Yes.
Like, they're good to go. Like, everything else is printed on their cards. Now, printed on their cards does not mean the players understand what is on the cards, right? But, like, after you've done that, like I like to get into the game and then take breaks to be like, oh, hey, so-and-so is using a card. This is how it works. It requires spending stress. We haven't actually talked about stress yet. What is it? It's one more pool your character has. You didn't have to worry about it until now because I wasn't worried about it. Now let's talk about it. Okay, that took 2 minutes. Now we're back to role playing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think like once you take your players through character creation, which is pretty simple, and explain here's the role, here's the hope and fear die, you can just start playing and learn as you go. We'll dig into this a little bit more when we talk about our tips in detail. I wish that I had had a little bit of a better grasp of some things when I started. On the other hand, you kind of don't know what you don't know, so I there were some things that there's no way I could have anticipated, but I agree that this is a great system for just going. The things that I missed or the things that my players missed did not massively or really even like importantly impact the game. There are some things that I wish that I had known, but it was perfectly fun and worthwhile to just learn as we were going. This was a great game to sort of like pick up and jump into. Major kudos for Daggerheart for being the type of game that you can just throw everybody into and have a good time. Not easy in a TTRPG, to be honest.
I guess my other like experience doing this is, and I think this is pretty common reading around the experience game mastering online, is that, it's just like, wow, characters can do a whole lot in fights, and I have so here. I guess I should. Forefront, we said we would talk about our experiences.
Right.
One, I made up a one shot basically in the hour before the game. Another, I was like, how will this do running a D&D adventure? I ran the Celestial job, available at patreon.com/Dungeon Master of None. That went great. And another, I ran one of Daggerheart's pre-made adventures that came out with the beta by Michael Underwood, which
friend of the show.
I think friend of the show went really well. And yeah, I I realized that this game, I put it I feel like I put it through its paces. Like when I ran the Celestial job, there was one combat, and my players were like, wow, this game was really great, I love this. And at the end of it, I was like, ooh, I don't know, we only spent about 20 minutes in combat. Obviously that's fine, but I was like, oh no, I didn't really like try anything out. But now that I've got like some combats under my belt, I feel like a little more confident running things. Anyway, that's like how my experience has been going.
Yeah, so like I said, I've been running a regular game with a group of new players, people I know, but people I've not run a game for, and it's been going pretty well. I definitely feel like there were some things that I needed to figure out in the first few sessions that I did, and the sessions tend to follow sort of like a similar format, but I'm getting between 1 and 3 combats, and they all go pretty quickly and pretty dramatically, and they vary in challenge and intensity, and that's been a lot of fun. I think my players are really enjoying the system. The consensus seems to be, one of my players also is a sometime GM, that it's a lot more fun to be a player in Daggerheart than it is to be a GM, and my experience is that that's true. It's not all bad, but we'll talk about this in a minute. I have been surprised at actually how some aspects of GMing are more challenging than I expected. When we read this book, I was like, oh, they make being a GM so easy, which is true. But there are definitely some things that were a surprise that is part of the reason why I wanted to do this episode. Because if you're thinking about running Daggerheart, if you know about these things, then I think it'll be a lot easier for you. But despite the fact that it presents itself as a relatively like rules light, maybe even like fiction first type of game, there are some pitfalls that I was a little surprised by.
In your campaign so far, you're using one of the pre-made campaign frames.
I am.
Motherboard.
Yeah, Motherboard.
How is that going? What is the campaign ended up being about, as far as you can tell so far?
Well, I like the campaign frames. We talked about it. They give you plenty to get started. So this is really like 3/4 homebrew, because the campaign frame is just the setting. So I mashed together the science fantasy setting of Motherboard with a basic Western, and the players are quickly and violently introduced to a frontier company town and thrown into some machinations involving tech barons and not Pinkertons and various worker factions and all that. And it's been fun. The Motherboard setting is great as sort of like a background. I love the science fantasy, high tech, discovered
Weird animal robots.
Yeah, weird animal robots. Finding artifacts in hidden vaults, and what that might look like and be. And it's cool. I really like there's some like light additional mechanics for Motherboard. All of the campaign frames have a couple of additional ones, and they get to collect scrap from the weird robots that they fight and make things out of it. It's fun. I like that kind of stuff.
So has the campaign been about going and finding scrap, or has it just been like sort of this political campaign where they're negotiating factions? Or
this has nothing to do with Daggerheart or the campaign frame, but it has been mostly like political intrigue. I've been trying to push them toward the wastes to do some dungeon delving and finding scrap and learning mysteries about the past, but they really want to know what's going on with the mysterious industrialist and all the worker unrest, and I think we've kind of just about reached the end of that arc, and they're going to be thrust out into the wider world. But that's okay. That's sometimes you set up one thing and your players do another.
That sounds super fun to be a player
it's fun.
in that.
I love this stuff. It's very easy for me to continue spinning my web of intrigue, but I was trying to lean on the Weird West a little bit more. And
right, you're going to go out into this Weird West and then come back and deal with the intrigue. Okay,
but that's okay.
Sure.
That's it just means we're sort of like just moving the order of things around a little bit. It just means that we're laying some groundwork quicker than I anticipated, and it's been a really fun game. The players are liking it, and I get to do a lot of cowboy voices, which is always fun for me.
Well, ain't you a tall drink, a 10-gallon hat, or whatever a cowboy would say?
That's right. Something like that.
Something like that. Well, Rob, like, let's get into like some of our tips, and let's start with like what is, I guess, the opposite of what you brought up. What has been really easy so far, and why do you think it's been easy? How did you accomplish the easier part of game mastering Daggerheart?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few things that are really easy. It's super easy to call for any role, right? This is something that's not true of 5e. There are other games where it's easier, but I'm sort of inherently comparing this to 5e or Pathfinder. But if they want to do something, there's only 5-6 stats, and they're a lot more to me intuitive than D&D's, and so I'm It's also easier for players to figure out what to roll. So, if I'm like, oh, you're trying to jump a chasm, all right, give me a strength roll. Like, oh, you want to figure out this guy's lying to you, all right? How about instinct? It's very easy. That's a small thing, but it's it makes just oh, something happened. I want you to roll for it. I know what to tell them, and they know what to roll like that. That's been super easy, very smooth to like keep the game running. Those are also very. This is what we talked about when we talked about the setting as a whole. Because of the hope and fear mechanic, there's always something interesting happening with those rolls.
Right. Yeah, no, to build on that, the thing that I think new DMs to Daggerheart should keep in mind that I also found really easy is we all have those roles where, okay, this is not part of a larger action or combat sequence or even an in-depth like navigation of a hazard or an obstacle or a log negotiation. It's just something, usually an exploration or some low stakes social interaction where you're like, yeah, you need a roll for that, right? There are some stakes. And just having that you succeed with hope and fear lets me know I use it to guide the like conversation or the exploration in just like, well, you got what you want. The next obstacle is difficult or easy, or there's a new thing in your way, or there's not a new thing in your way. The next thing is already there, right? I'm speaking in vague terms, but like in a dialogue, right? Oh, if you succeed with fear, their next question is like really pointed, or the next person arrives unexpectedly.
Yeah, this is again, I want to build on that. That's a great point. It makes sort of building the scene very intuitive. Like Matt said, if they roll with hope, something good happens. They get a hope. They get what they want. If they roll with fear, you introduce a complication. Maybe they mark a stress if it's really bad. But it provides, I think, just enough guidance. I don't know, I want to say like feedback to you as the GM while you're running the scene to sort of know where to go next without having to 100% spin it out of, thin air. And it's not all that different from D&D, but for some reason setting DCs feels a lot easier. I mean, most of the time my players are still relatively low level, so it's a 15 if it's something that's challenging, or a 10 if I just want to see if they're going to really fuck it up, a 20 if it's really hard. It's very intuitive to set DCs, and that makes it when I have time to plan, there's not like a huge difference, but every time Daggerheart is a lot more easy to me, I don't know, accurately improvise. I do it in D&D too, and it works out fine, but like I feel like I'm not just like building the plane as I'm going with Daggerheart. Like I feel like I can pretty quickly on the spot come up with the right roll and make the right, or what feels like a more secure decision in the moment. It takes some of the stress out of improvising.
Break down that intuition for that you feel for those of us who don't have the intuition for setting DCs. Like what I've been doing is looking at the chart on the back of my DM screen and or in my GM guide. And then if I feel like the 5 number chunks are too high, I'm adding or subtracting 2. That's what I'm doing.
No, I mean that's perfectly good. The intuition to me is less about like getting it exactly right and more like, I think this is because of the curve on the 2d12 instead of the d20. It means that like if I set a DC at 10, they're reasonably gonna get it most of the time, and if I set the DC at 15 and they spend a little hope, they give advantage, they put a little juice on it, then they're gonna get that most of the time, and that feels good to me. It doesn't always work out that way, right? Like it doesn't always. So you can still roll like shit in Daggerheart,
yeah.
But because there's less swinginess, I feel very good. Like if I'm like, they should get this, it's a 10. They need to work for this, it's a 15. This is a real stretch, it's a 20. That has been working pretty well for me. Sometimes I do eke it up and down a little bit if I want to fine tune it, but like this is what I mean by on the fly intuiting. That has been working really, really well for me.
I I don't believe in intuition. I don't believe that 6 exists, Rob. You know me.
I do know
I
this.
believe
Matt and I are
intuition is
different this
just
way.
like just knowledge and experience and skills you have that are just in there somewhere. So it can be learned. For me, what was very helpful if you Google Daggerheart probability chart was just looking at that probability chart for a little while, or spreadsheet or graph or something like that, to get the sort of basic, here is what it is. And if you Google it, you'll find ones that are like, here's how it's different than a D20 system, right?
I mean, I said intuition.
You don't
and
have to
I described some
study
things
this.
that are
that are
See,
quite that's
concrete.
exactly what
So,
you did, right?
So
So these are the concrete things I did. These are the concrete things
I don't
Rob
know what I'm
did.
talking about.
Yeah.
They are based on more than just like gut feeling, but it's
Yeah.
easier to throw those together without consulting a chart, which I often have to do for D&D if I want to get my DCs correct, or if I want the DCs to be in the right range. Your experience may vary with this, because it does kind of depend on, well, your players' roles. Are they rolling well? Are they rolling poorly? Are they using their resources? Do they have tools, right? Like, do they have experiences to juice that roll, right? A +2 is significant on a DC 10 or a DC 15. And my players are pretty good about this. So they when they want to make it happen, they're pretty good at like making sure that they put a little extra effort on whatever that role is.
Speaking of players making rolls, this has happened in 2 out of my 3 one-shots, and it happened quite frequently in the most recent one. Daggerheart, like many role-playing games, has nothing in the rules that you can do to alter the outcome of a roll after you've made it, right? It is not your zero engine, which is why your zero engine is one of my favorite systems, or the Cypher system from Monty Cook Games has this as well. So I have added to my notes for my next Daggerheart game, just like really remind players that if they want to use one of their abilities that like gives them the big die for their hope die, or they want to use assistance for someone else, or if they most frequently want to tag an experience and spend a hope to get a +2, which is really important, right? And they kind of learn this after a couple sessions. They realize they're only failing by 2. God damn it, I should have spent a hope. You got to remind them they need to do that before the roll, because it is a true teachable moment. That I like how the system works. I think it works for Daggerheart that you can't affect the roll after you've made it, which really, gives you that tension of, do I really want to succeed? Let's find out what happens, and then the results are in that dice roll.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like this both ways. I love your zero engine because you can modify things after the roll, but I think the important thing is to be consistent, right? Like a system should be consistent about this. There are a couple of abilities. I have a wizard in my campaign, and the wizard hope feature is spend 3 hope to force an adversary to re-roll an attack or damage roll. That is my roll, not theirs, but there are a limited number of abilities that allow some after the fact re-rolling. But like Matt said, if you want to spend an experience, if you want to do a tag team roll, if you want to do a group roll, there's lots of ways to like help, but you need to be thinking about that ahead of time. And this is a great point. My group is very good about thinking about it ahead of time. They have just like a good sense for, this is an important role, or I have resources and I want to spend them. Other groups, and me personally as a player, 9 times out of 10, regardless of the game, I don't ever remember to do this until afterwards, which is which is why I like games like your Zero Engine, because they let you do it after you get a sense for it. But so this will affect sort of like how the game runs, because I think one cool thing to me about Daggerheart is that you have a lot of tools as a group and as a player to improve your outcomes. It's relatively easy to grant advantage if you have hope. It's relatively easy to use an experience if it makes sense, and if you have hope. A lot of this is really dependent on having the resource to spend, which is something I'd like to talk about a little bit down the road. But this rewards players that spend their hope and also are thinking about how to improve their outcomes.
Well, that bringing that up takes me to my next tip that I figured out after my first one shot, which is I ran it as the Daggerheart gods intended with the character sheets and everything, and then what I realized was I couldn't easily tell how much hope all the players had, how many hit points they had, and to a lesser extent things like armor and stress. But for those two, I was like, how, and this is true for most role-playing games. Things are recorded on character sheets, and especially for hope, it's such a quickly exchanged and quickly gotten back resource that you just kind of like need to know in the moment, just like your players kind of need to know, or at least you definitely need to know exactly how many fear you have. So I tried to use some custom character sheets for my second one shot that had little slots for poker chips for the 4 resources: armor, hit points, stress, and hope. Those character sheets didn't work with the cool like play aids and stuff like that, so I abandoned them on my third one. But what I kept was using chips for hope, and that way I could look at a player and be like, listen, you're sitting on 4 hope. You said you really hope you get this, I'm going to remind you, please spend your hope to add an experience to this roll, because you're almost at max or something like that. Or sometimes they are at max, especially for new players. Chips, I think, or some kind of token, at least for hope and maybe for the other ones, in my opinion, are essential to this game.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Trackers or tokens or something help you and help your players keep track of this. I have a stack of black dice that I keep. That's my fear stack, and I make sure my players can always see how much fear I have at any given point in time. When they roll with fear, I very obviously take one and put it in the stack so they know what's happening. The hope is a great mechanic. I really like it, and Matt and I talked about it in our Metacurrencies episode, and when we talked about this the first time. Something that I noticed, Matt, and I don't know if you encountered this, is that, and this only happened one time, but if players don't have hope, especially at low levels, they're fucked. And also, it can be kind of unfun. Like this is something. It was only sort of like an issue for one part of one combat, but a player who really has some great abilities, but needs at least a little hope to use them, was out of hope and was feeling like pretty useless. And there's lots of ways to get hope, and there's most of the time the players go into a combat with a pretty decent amount, but he kept rolling with fear and kept not being effective in combat. And there's nothing that you necessarily need to do as a GM except kind of keep track of, like Matt said, like, do they have a lot? Do they not have a lot? Very much. Do feel free to just give it out, because it's very impactful, but they will go through it quickly if they're in a pinch. And yeah, this was a thing that surprised me a little, I think.
Yeah, I get mechanically like why this happens, because when you have hope, you can spend hope to get a bonus on a roll, and that makes it more likely. It doesn't make it more likely you'll get your hope back, but it makes it more likely you'll succeed and all this stuff. When you're out of hope, I was thinking about this. I noticed the same thing. I think one thing you can do is lean into the player being out of hope, right? If you want that combat where it's like, oh shit, our little Greeble or Galrapa is in trouble, right? They are getting swarmed. Like, lean into what the meta currency is telling you. That will the side effects of that, and I wish I had done this when this came up in my game, means that, hey, because of the way initiative works, and we haven't talked about it yet, is that character will probably have more rolls coming their way. Like, we should move the spotlight back to them. Let's see if they can break out or try and get away, or defend against all of they're surrounded by enemies. So have them make more rolls, and that's going to get them more hope. But it's also just like a fun way to be like, hey, we've all seen in movies and TV shows, I think this is what Daggerheart's going for. where there's that one character who is imperiled in this particular fight, even if it's a fight where, overall we're winning or losing.
I mean, this can work to your advantage as a GM. I ran a really nasty monster in my last combat that removed a hope on every successful attack, and so by the middle of the fight, every player was like completely out of hope. But that meant that they'd still gotten to do some cool things at the start, and that meant by the time that they got to the end of this sort of like grueling, dramatic, terrifying battle against an implacable foe, that they felt so, relieved and thrilled that they'd beaten
Artax. Artax. No. Yeah. What were they fighting? The Swamp of Sadness? Is it?
It was I reskinned the shark. The shark has a terrifying bite ability.
Nice.
I turned it into a big walking sandworm remnant robot thing. It was very very horrible. Anyway,
nice.
Good ability, but yeah, it can give, like Matt said, the hope mechanic is trying to communicate something dramatically in terms of the narratively as well as mechanically, right? And so you can lean into that loss of hope. I don't know that this is entirely something that you have to adjust for as a GM. I was just noticing in a couple of my sessions that when they were without hope, some players felt a lot less useful.
They're in the hope hole.
They're in the hope hole. But it's so funny because, I mean, this is kind of like what I do love about the system is sometimes they'll go on a run, right? Sometimes the players will roll with hope 3 or 4 times, and suddenly, like, the combat swings, and then sometimes they'll roll with fear 3 times, and things are looking bad. I mean, I'll probably have to play for years to, like, really, like, fine-tune the balance on this, but I do. It is fun. It means that the combats are unexpected to me as a GM in ways that I didn't really anticipate, and that's really cool.
Let's see. I have my next tip loaded up if you want to jump in here.
Sure. So we're moving on to, I don't know, complications, I guess, if I were gonna, the tip that I would have for new Daggerheart GMs is to give yourself some time and flexibility when it comes to adversaries and planning combats. Yeah. This is, Daggerheart is not as combat heavy as some games, but there is potentially a lot of combat, and the rules I think are good. I'm going to come down on, like, I think the adversary rules are good and they make running combats easy and fun, but they are going to sort of like trip you up in ways that you didn't expect. A clear example of this is your adversaries. They have hit points. They also have stress. They have their own thresholds, and then they have their own sort of like suite of abilities. And that is kind of a lot to keep track of. And you are encouraged correctly, I think, to run combats with like multiple types of adversaries, leaders that, encourage minions to do whatever, or bruisers paired with ranged. This is cool. This is fun. This is, 4E combat stuff. But what that means is that you need a bunch of stat blocks and room to record their stress and HP and thresholds. And I put them all on index cards, so I've been handling that just fine. But it was kind of overwhelming when I first started because I expected it to be pretty smooth, and it was, but it wasn't.
Yeah, I can concur, Doctor, in that I've had my adversaries printed out from like the PDF, just like snipped off and put in my notes. But the one time I had to like grab an adversary on the fly, just like moving back to the book because it's so complicated, it is not to bellyache too much. It is really sad that we got all these amazing cards and a huge amount of adversaries, but they were not put it on cards because I've got those clear sleeves just so I can like, stick my adversaries in there. I got to like do some modification of the text and make some print and play adversary cards or something like that because reading those like special ability blocks is something that you kind of have to do beforehand. Like in one of my one shots, I forgot, like one of the blocks has like a little conditional. It's like you use this when the players are vulnerable. And I was like, oh, I forgot it's when they're vulnerable. I didn't accidentally use it on a player that isn't vulnerable, but it means I was using the wrong things earlier to make this fight dramatic because I wasn't trying to make anyone vulnerable, right? Which when I was doing it correctly, it made the fight really dramatic. But I forgot to remember the conditional of their like kill move.
This is a cool thing. Something that happens in Daggerheart if you use the adversary rules, if you build a cool encounter, is that they inherently work together. They're built that way. Like, you know, if this adversary does this, then this adversary could do that. If the leader commands the guy to do this, he gets this much bonus, whatever. This is really cool. This feels fun and dramatic when you're running it, but you have to prepare. You have to read and you have to know about those things because it's not obvious and it's not intuitive necessarily. It gets easier, but this was a thing that tripped me up too. I did almost the exact same thing as Matt. I had a adversary that did a special thing on vulnerable, but I don't think they don't have a way to do vulnerable themselves, and they were supposed to work together with a different adversary from the same bad guy group, and I was like, oh shoot, I didn't think this through enough, and it turned out to be fine. But yeah, this is just give yourself a little bit more time and do a little bit more prep than you might expect when it comes to adversaries. I'm going to say that the upside to this is that I've had some really cool combats, some really fun, really interesting ones where the bad guys do some like really awesome combos and the players were like, whoa, it's very cool, but it's not as easy. They make it, here's a maybe a little belly aching. The Daggerheart book makes it seem easy, but that's not as easy as they make it seem. They're a little bit too casual about some of the things, and in practice, you really do have to prep a bit.
Here's an example with the NPC stat tracking that I started doing in my second one shot. So a lot of NPCs, adversaries, have a mark of stress to do a thing. And I was like, I'm not fucking keeping track of this unless like the players have a special ability that like affects their stress, then I'm absolutely keeping track of it. So what I did was, if it was not an important NPC and it had a thing that it can mark a stress to do, you're going to use this once in this combat. If it was a big one,
I do the same thing. Yes, yeah. You get one use, and then I'm going to pretend that it doesn't exist because I'm not keeping track of stress. That is exactly what I did, man. I did the same thing.
Yeah. It just switching it from a 1 a day or 2 a day ability, or you could easily. I think another way to approach it is just treat those stress things as like they shouldn't do them every round. So if it's like a really long action scene, well, okay, it's going to take a couple times when they're spotlighted before they do it again.
Yeah.
Speaking of, wait, do you want to keep talking about adversaries, or you want to talk about spotlighting?
Let's talk about spotlighting, because this is related. Yeah.
I think my first advice to people who are coming to Daggerheart from any sort of system that has rigid tracking of turns, right? Whether it's Savage Worlds or D&D or a Free League system or Shadowrun, all of these systems rely on a lot of turn stuff. And of course, Daggerheart does not, right? The spotlight system is just who's going next. Is it does the DM take in the spotlight or the GM take in the spotlight? If not, the players decide who to go next. And then players, of course, can keep doing actions. My first piece of advice is like, don't worry about this so much. If you're someone who's worrying about it so much, stop. This is not a new innovation in role-playing games. It exists in hundreds of systems, and it works fine in all those systems. It works fine in this one as well. There's more advice to be had. We'll get into it, but big picture, stop worrying about it.
I want to agree with that, and I really like the spotlight system, the fear-hope dynamic, because you just go with the flow, man. Like you don't have to panic. The system does it for you. If the players roll with fear, it's your turn. If they don't, it's theirs. Like, very simple. If you're a control freak, yeah, okay, maybe that's a problem, but I don't know, don't be. Or play a different system if you are. Like, there's lots of systems where you have absolute ironclad control of who goes when.
Or if you feel like you've got to take control, right, you can spend a fear to
You can always
control.
you can always just spend a fear to do that. But yeah, I agree with Matt. This works out really well in play. I want to talk. Well, should we talk more about initiative right now, or let's focus on spotlighting?
Let's focus on spotlighting.
And then I want to come back to initiative. But Matt's correct. Don't worry about it. It's going to be fine.
Obviously, I think this is nothing to do with Daggerheart and everything to do with the number of people that exist in a small space. This initiative system works better with smaller groups than with larger groups. The same is true of any sort of tracking initiative system as well. So it's not really a new thing, but it's not a magic bullet that solves the problem of large tables.
Yeah. The only thing that works at a large table is going clockwise or counterclockwise. So everything else is complicated and takes longer than it would with a small group of people. So yeah, this is more difficult the more people you have, but that's a solvable problem. But it is a problem. It's just one you have to be aware of.
The other thing that, and I forgot to do, I did this in my second one shot. I forgot to do it in my last one, but it worked really well when I did it, is because not all roles have the same weight, right? Narratively, in sort of spotlight tracking times, it's important to remind your players, hey, you just succeeded with hope. And then they kind of, I think, naturally, we solved the initiative. They want to be nice people. I'd say this is like 90% of players. I'm sure there's a 10% exception. They turn to the group and it's like, what now? Just remind them they can keep going, right? I think for most considerate players, you have to remind them that maybe the thing that makes the most sense and is the most fun is, keep going, keep attacking, right? There's the other people don't have ideas of what to do yet. They need the situation to change in order to act.
Yeah.
You don't. You keep doing the same thing or a different thing. Keep going.
This is a great piece of advice, and it's not every time. And my players have started to figure out, and it's cool because there are times in combats where there's one person who needs to be doing the thing and everybody else is waiting for sort of like conditions to change. And so they're like, yeah, keep going. Keep doing what you're doing. It isn't intuitive though, because
no, it's not.
Every player is used to, I go, somebody else goes, I go, somebody else goes. It's a thing that needs to be learned, but I think groups will figure it out. But remind them that, like Matt said, remind them that it's possible.
If you need to prove it to them, just remind them that when they've been playing any other role-playing game that has a structured action initiative, they're outside of that structured action initiative. People do this all the time, right? I opened the lock. Well, I'm going to keep the spotlight, right? I'm going to keep the focus of the game on me. Now I'm going to sneak past the guards. Okay, yeah, of course. Why not? Let's keep this going. That works just fine in the initiative system of Daggerheart.
Yeah, it's a little counterintuitive, but players will pick up on it. But the point that I think Matt is correct about is you maybe need to remind them, what they can do.
Any issues that you've had to navigate with the spotlight system that we have some tips and workarounds?
This may be just like a Rob problem. I don't know if this was difficult for anybody else, but I'll tell you that I did run into it.
Just like I don't believe in intuition, I don't believe in Rob problems, right? If one person has a question, that means six people have a question.
So I haven't read through it. Well, I've read through this book 2 or 3 times. I haven't confirmed with absolute precision, but as far as I can tell, this is not actually stated anywhere. But it's heavily implied by the book that you can only spotlight an adversary once per turn. So when the turn turns over to you, when they roll fear, you can spotlight any number of adversaries that you have fear for, but only once. And the thing that sort of implies this is there are some adversaries that have
special abilities.
Ability called Relentless that says this could be spotlighted more than once. Now, that makes perfect sense. The book should say that explicitly at some point, and I made the mistake, and now I realize it was a mistake, in some early combats of letting adversaries just sort of go, because I didn't have that many on the board, and so I let them go multiple times. I had the fear for it, and it wasn't bad or anything, but per the rules of the game, I wasn't supposed to do that. So that was.
I mean, obviously, you just made a custom adversary stat block for those special people. They had the relentless ability.
I just gave them the relentless ability. The other thing, and this is a very small thing, but I didn't realize it until like the third session, is that you can only have 12 fear at a time as a GM.
Yeah.
And my players had a long rest. And I don't know, I think I got up to 15 before we got to combat. This didn't make a huge difference, but this is definitely something that may happen to you. There have been sessions where I've collected quite a lot of fear very quickly, especially if your players are doing any kind of resting, you can get a lot. This is not where I would expect it to be in the book, so I didn't recall this piece of information until a few sessions in. I do think that this is important for your fear economy. I think it makes sense balance-wise. So that was something that I wish that I had known ahead of time. It meant that I would have spent more fear on other things. But these were, I guess, pitfalls, mechanical rules pitfalls that I encountered, sort of corner cases that surprised me. And not a big deal. Didn't really impact the game dramatically, but I felt like I would have designed some things differently if I had known that ahead of time.
I think this can become a problem, or at least I faced as a problem, where I was getting a lot of fear and the players were avoiding like some sort of, I guess, this is general advice against avoiding set piece precious encounters. They were like finding a workaround where like there would be a exciting encounter where I would dump a lot of fear to make that encounter more challenging. Yeah, yeah, you gotta max yourself, keep yourself capped at 12, and if they're approaching that, it's probably it's the meta courtesy's way of telling you it's time to spend a fear to add a little complication. But I guess, there really isn't a rule that says you have to do that. If you want the players to continue with their smooth sailing because you need to get to the next thing, you can be a little threatening to them. You can be like, well, I'm sitting on 12 fear.
Yeah.
Looming darkness ahead. A snake skitters across your path.
This is actually one of the things that I wanted to talk about with you most, Matt, because I think it's interesting, and I don't actually have a strong, or I'm not 100% about this, right? Because the other thing, the fear's most obviously used for controlling the flow of battle and spotlighting your adversaries in an actual combat. But there are other things that you can use fear for, that you can use your fear for a GM move, right? And GM moves are things like changing the environment, or bringing up something from a player's backstory, or having an NPC act on something out of their background, foregrounding a villain, blah, blah, blah. Good stuff. But these are things that I just sort of do, right? As I am game mastering. And I think it's interesting. I think this is a very interesting idea, encouraging you to spend fear to do some of these GM moves, because some of them feel like, well, the world is just responding organically to the actions of the players, and so I'm just narrating what happens. But some things kind of feel a little bit more narratively dramatic. And I had one session where the players got to the end and they'd avoided combat entirely, and I had a whole stack of 12 fear, and so I just said, well, here's some meta information. I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to show you what some of your foes are up to sort of like lay the groundwork for to build the tension. And that was really fun, actually. That was really cool.
You made a move the characters can't see.
Yes.
But you let the players see it.
But I let the players see. And so when that, bad guy ambushes them, or when they find out that somebody has betrayed them, the players will know. The characters, of course, will be surprised, but they'll know that was sort of seeded because I had all of this fear and these are the GM moves that I made. So I just sort of enjoyed having that sort of like mechanical outlet. I haven't yet figured out, do I want to challenge myself to spend fear this way if I'm getting up to like 10, 12 and they're not close to a combat? Do I want to we're going to have a little bit of a flashback here, or here's the way that the sort of environment is changing based on thus and thus. I think that's a cool idea. I guess the thing that I'm not sure about is like, am I going to be able to stick to that while I do that? Because it's not as intuitive to me as just sort of narrating how the world responds, right? That's the sort of my sort of like GM DM style is, you do this to me, that means that this will happen, thus on and so on. One thing that I'm
here's my 2 cents on this before you get to the next point on like when to spin to fear, when to move naturally, is to sort of ask yourself, is the ability to like avoid this pretty much out of the player's hands, right? If they're setting off a trap where a portcullis divides the party, and like, well, I'll let you make a strength check to a strength reaction roll to try and grab it, and right. But if I spin to fear, I'm just saying it. Well, it just slams down. It happens. The party's split. I was gonna do this with the splitting the party in an encounter. And then the party split themselves anyways, so I just kept I was low on fear, so I wasn't worried about it, but I was like, okay, great.
Yeah, actually, this is a really good point, because there are some things that, well, they're written into a lot of, especially like classic like D&D modules, like annoying traps or rock falls or whatever, and I think that if you have something like, the portcullis falls and divides the party, and they don't get a roll for it, that feels less punishing if you're like, I'm spending a fear or 2 fear to make this happen. Another use case that I thought of is like, if I want the villain to get away, I think it feels a lot less frustrating if I spend fear to make that happen than if I just do it, oftentimes I like, this is written into either the module or my notes. Like I'll say there's a portcullis here, or the villain gets away because of X reason. I try to make it make it make sense. And if the players do something that like gets around what I prepared, I like let them have it. But does it make a difference to them if I wrote it down first, and or if I make it up and it's a fear. So this is I think to me as a GM one of the most interesting things about Daggerheart, and one of the things that I'm still very much learning, because I think the sort of like touchstone for Daggerheart is more cinematic, right? It's you want to be thinking in scenes, you want to be thinking in terms of like a camera angle, in terms of who's the director, to use sort of a fate term, right? Mm-hmm. to do montages or flashbacks, whether or not these are mechanical, you are encouraged to be sort of like, the narrative that you're telling is a movie or a TV show rather than a book. And so some of that can be facilitated by fear, setting up scenes in a certain way or showing things that are not immediately obvious.
I think of it as the difference of, am I going to use this to make a more narratively, cinematically challenging thing for my players, right? Using that, like asking a question. Sometimes you might just do that because you didn't just write down in your notes the mannerisms of an NPC. So you ask the players, what about this NPC really tells you they're a pirate? Come up with a wacky descriptor. But if you're asking that question so that you can, remind a player of their backstory about, how they spent their life fighting pirates because they destroyed their home village or something, and you're going to do some drama and stress and, social interaction with this, ask that particular player, what about this NPC tells you that they're a pirate, and reminds you of, your trauma.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think it's an opportunity, right? Like it's a cool the way that this is designed, I think is I don't know, it feels to me as a game master a bit more like I'm playing a game than when I'm GMing other games. And that is different, but fun in some unexpected ways. This is definitely there are definitely some parts of this that I'm still learning and figuring out, but it's cool. It's fun. I like it.
My last like GM tip is I don't know if they ever came out with their like guide to homebrewing this system or not. I forgot to check before this episode, but I know that's something that the Darrington Press team vaguely alluded to or actually promised or something like that. I remember reading something about it.
I'm not sure if it's come out yet either, though my impression on that was aimed at people who wanted to like make their own classes or codec or domains or something like that, not for GM specifically. So
right.
When it does come out, I kind of want to see what's in it.
Even though before that comes out, I give you, this is true for all systems, but I give you a special double DM permission. After 2 of my 3 one-shots, and it was the 2 of the 3 one-shots where we did the really quick character creation at the beginning, I've had 2 different players, and of course they're players who have played other systems and wanted to make a character that envisioned the hero that like responded to the prompt or fit their idea, which is just play around with the classes and domains and stuff like that. You want to be like a hedge wizard that's domains are Arcana and Sage, which, but you don't want Wild Shape. Well, fine. We'll take the Sorcerer class and then those... actually, those are the 2 domains for... No, sorry, Sorcerer's Arcana and Midnight, right?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, there's no reason why you can't do this. There are some things to be aware of, like, some of the, like, oh, wow, this thing is built around tanking, and if you're not taking those tanking powers, you're not going to be good at tanking. But if a player is asking you for this, I think they know the consequences of this. The system has prevented you from making a character that is useless. That is a good thing for new characters. And by useless, I mean useless at like at least one aspect or role of the game in action sequences. But the restrictions on picking domains, I don't think are there to prevent you from making a broken character. So if you're worried about that, well, I'm personally not. I don't care. But if it would make a player happy, you should do it. Just let them be like, hey, your 2 domains are different.
I would love to tinker with this some more, but I agree with Matt, and I don't know, maybe I will. Maybe we'll spend some time on it. Taking this with a heavy grain of salt because I haven't aggressively play tested it, but I think it's very hard to make a broken character. You can make a powerful character, but that's because a lot of these abilities are powerful, and most abilities, most really powerful abilities.
I think the things that are already broken are already paired together, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like,
So the thing that makes them powerful is that they usually have a cost. They usually have a hope cost or a stress cost or something. So even if your players do manage to come up with something super powerful, it isn't a guarantee. Like it's still limited by this resource. My group figured out that they could use the wizard's arcane door ability, which allows you to teleport something that steps on a little spot, a far distance away. That they could use the valor shove ability to knock a bad guy into it and teleport them 100 feet up in the air. They have managed to pull that off one time.
Nice.
They have tried it a couple of other times, and if they get really good at it, I may have to be like, okay, this doesn't work under these, or they get a roll or something. But the point I'm making here is that's a cool combination. It still requires hope to use
the fact
a couple
that
of successful
with
rolls.
no other rulings, it's only worked once out of 4 times is telling me that it's already not that powerful.
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
can see why your players are obsessed with it. It's incredibly hilarious.
It's hilarious. But that's sort of like my point. Is like there's probably some things that if you put them together would be pretty powerful, but they're gonna require multiple roles. They're gonna require some resources. They're gonna it's gonna.
The
take
thing is
setup.
that requires like 2 actions. If it's from one person, just spin
still
to
2
fear and
actions.
take the initiative back.
Right.
You know, or that will happen naturally.
Exactly. So so I would love to see this in practice, but I think Matt's right. You could probably let your players pick from other domains. You can probably let them pick and choose from class abilities. You could let them. I know there are rules for some kind of rules for multi-classing, but you can just sort of make it. Feel free. I think the way you started this, Matt, is like I think that this is a very homebrew friendly system, in that you could probably move things around and make changes without breaking anything or making anything that is too powerful. It's also homebrew friendly, in my opinion, in that it's pretty easy to make adversaries. There's very simple rules for like what their basic stats should be. You can pull abilities and reskin them. So far, I haven't had any trouble with them being too powerful or not powerful enough. It makes it really easy to build something on the fly, bearing in mind all that advice that I gave about adversaries in general. This is a very flexible system. Again, take this with a grain of salt because I haven't put it through its paces, but my impression is that you can really like adjust things without too many problems.
Yeah, I think the same is true for other like of the fiddly bits, like the primary weapons.
Yeah. Sorry,
So
this is a whole nother issue. I've basically like thrown out the rules for weapons, and I don't want to get into rules to the details for that because it's not important. But I don't like how they're written in the book, and so I just changed them.
Yeah. I mean, the general guidelines, if you or your players found these dissatisfying, is that 2-handed weapons do more damage or are more likely to have a special positive ability, right? If a weapon does a lot of damage, it should have a negative ability. And that, as far as I can tell, because ability scores don't interact with like your other stats like armor and stress and HP, there's no ability that's really more important than others, right? Like in some games, like, well, agility weapons are always better than finesse weapons or something like that. I think the other general thing is that things that go with mental traits tend to have lower special stuff than things that go with physical, the 3 physical traits, but that's like it.
Yeah. I think that I think the way that they're written is a little bit annoying, but there's also, I think, a lot of opportunity to do cool things. Yeah. Equipment is in an interesting place. I don't think it's bad, but some of the rules did annoy me, so I just changed them. But again, I don't think that there's any sort of like balance problem with that.
At the beginning of the episode, Rob, you said you wanted to talk about a couple of hard things and like maybe resources that you had been struggling, like managing resources and stuff like that. I feel like we got to some of those, but what are some of the other hard things?
I mean, that was mainly the thing that I was the fear that I was talking about, and making sure that we
managing your fear,
which wasn't hard, but it was I guess there were complications that I didn't expect. Like I said earlier, I do enjoy it, and I think it's provided some very interesting constraints, but I'm still kind of figuring it out. The only thing what I meant when I said at the beginning is I would want a new GM to be aware of that, because if I could go back and like tell myself this is going to give you like a little bit of a pause later on, that's what I want to know, because everything else is has been mostly stuff I expected, but that was
sunshines and rainbows,
more or less, or the kind of challenge that I'm used to. But the fear was a little different.
Dust bowls and mega robot worms,
rattlesnakes, and oil wells.
You also mentioned that you would bring up at the end that there was something you missed when you were first running.
Oh, that was the thing about spotlighting. That was spotlighting. Again,
nice.
A small thing. And you again, Matt, I don't think you ran into this problem. You figured it out right away. But like I said, it's not mentioned in the rules, and so I technically got it wrong for a couple of sessions. So that's just something that I would want to know. The only reason why I mentioned
it's also
that is that
really useful to know, like, hey, do you want a big bad? Give them Relentless 3.
Give them Relentless. I just would have designed a couple of encounters a little bit differently with that in mind. It wasn't, the thing is, it's not even bad. This is really just like me, like personally having high standards for myself. And I'm like, oh, that could have gone better if I had known this a little bit sooner. That's really what it's about. Because the other thing we said at the beginning is that this is a great game to just sort of like start playing. And the truth is, it's gone great. There really have not, like, I've had a great time. My players have had a great time. And I feel like the game is running really well. I just, I'm always trying to do better. And so there's a few things that I wish that I could have done even more well. And that was really just like what I wanted to foreground for anybody who's thinking about picking this up. I think it's a game that's really fun to GM. But I guess I was going to say the one thing another thing that I missed is just that it is difficult. Like, there are some difficult things, especially about adversaries that you don't expect. Matt and I mentioned all of this. So I went in expecting to be able to really like loosey-goosey throw things together. And I would have benefited from a little bit more prep in a couple of areas, because now I know some things that are harder than I expected about running Daggerheart.
I think I've firmly come down in the camp that of all the fantasy role-playing games, if you don't want to do something that's OSR, or you don't want to do Nimble 5e because you're just done with anything that smacks of D20 rolls. This one's been my favorite, and I'm considering in my mind like the Free League fantasy games and other things that we haven't talked about on this show, but that we've read. This one's the top one. Like I promised several episodes ago, I'm switching my 5e game to it, but it actually hasn't happened yet because we didn't have time before we started playing. But all my players are on board because almost all of them have now tried one of the one shot. And so it didn't happen yet, but we'll wait for an act break.
I agree with Matt. I really like running this. I prefer it to 5e and Pathfinder 2e, which I repeatedly defend as good for GMs, and I'll stand by that, but I still like this better. I may have an opportunity to run Draw Steel in the next couple of weeks. I am very interested personally to compare the two, but now that I know what I didn't know, now that I've had some experience with it, Daggerheart has the least guesswork of any sort of like 5e fantasy tactical combat game that I have ever run. And I do like that. It wasn't as easy to find all the answers as I expected, but the answers are there now that I know where to find them, and now I know how to run the game. I am not having to really do any rules looking up or any sort of like weird corner case investigation, or I'm not having to make very many rulings because the game is consistent. There are good rules that are not always like 100% precise, but are close enough that I know what to do, and I am really enjoying that, to be honest.
Well, I've been enjoying running Daggerheart, and the important thing to remember about running Daggerheart is you should let the actors involved in the creation of the system to ruin your fun. So I think since the last time we talked about Daggerheart, so we can cut this, Rob, if you want, because listeners should know that Rob and I are not like actual play experts or really even frequent watchers of actual plays. But we know that Critical Role is the biggest or second biggest, maybe after Dimension 20, actual play. And
I think they're still the biggest. I think
still
they are
still the biggest.
Yeah.
And they started a new season with like Bryn Lee Mulligan as the DM, and I guess I just sort of assumed, because I don't really know anything about actual play, that if they were doing a fantasy campaign, it would be with their in-house fantasy system, but they're not. They're using D&D 2024.
2025 or 24.
Or 2025, yeah.
I think,
and so that was surprising to me. I'm sure there's like some economic decisions going on, but like to me, it's like, well, Jack Donaghy voice. It's vertical synergy, Lemon. It's vertical integration.
I feel the exact same way, and I'm going to say that I'm disappointed but not surprised. I think we maybe need to do an episode on this, maybe listen to the new thing. I know that they're right now, I think like PAX Unplugged is happening right now, and that they're announcing or talking about something related to Daggerheart. Maybe it's a different actual play or something. To me, this absolutely feels like a missed opportunity, but Critical Role is nothing if not, you could say consistent, you could say safe, depending on like how nice you want to be to the people of Critical Role. So I understand, but yeah, I was hoping for something different.
It doesn't
we'll
affect
talk about
me,
that,
but
yeah.
I guess it does have some consequences, and I can't exactly see how they're positive for the system of Daggerheart. They're not exactly negative, right? It's not like the system needs to have a flagship actual play using it. But it would have helped
cool.
more people play
cool.
the system.
We'll talk about that again.
Okay, maybe
soon.
that's a
because
a
there's
separate episode.
This is a little outside of our wheelhouse, and there's been a lot of chat.
We'd actually have to do some research or thinking about it besides just.
Well, yeah, we have to watch some things and read some things, but I have a take on this. Matt has a take on this, but it's going to take some more time to talk about. So anyway, we'll come back to that, but it is worth noting.
Yeah. Well, I'm really enjoying running Daggerheart. I'm happy we could share some very basic tips for some very new game masters of Daggerheart, which we all are because it's a new system. And if you, the listener of Dungeon Master of None, have any other tips or ideas that you've gleaned from running the game, please send them to us, dmofnone@gmail.com.
You can also find us on Blue Sky. You can join our Discord for free and chat at us there. You can also go to our Patreon at patreon.com.
For not free,
for $5 Rooskies a month, and find a lot more of our podcast as well as
it's $5 a month, but in Daggerheart rules, it's only a handful of coins.
Just a handful.
If you're like me, you're not tracking your wealth at all.
Patreon.com/Dungeon Master of None. We welcome your thoughts. Interesting things are happening. We'll talk about it more. As always, thanks for listening, everybody, and keep rolling them dice.
You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll.